the names that I saw on the screen. So let me just share my screen. And Sophia, can we see this? Perfect. Thank you very much. It was a kind and unnecessary introduction. And I really am glad to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces as well. So let's start. The Sassoons have gotten a lot of play with CSP. This is the third Zoom talk we have had that relates to the family. Way back in 2021, if you can remember that far back, actually on August 2nd, we had a CSP talk hosting the Pulitzer Prize winning reporter and author, Jonathan Kaufman, on his book about the Sassoons and their business dealings in Shanghai. Ari said that was one of the best talks he had ever heard. And this year on April 23rd, Sharon Mintz spoke about the Sassoon Codex. If you missed them, both of them are available for you to watch on the CSP YouTube channel. And Sophia, maybe you can drop the link to the YouTube channel into the chat so that people who don't know CSP can find some of the talks that we've had there. And if you're not a member of CSP, I'm going to use this opportunity to plug CSP membership. It's the best money you will ever spend. It's fantastic. Of course, we've also had two CSP local programs about the Codex, both with Sharon Mintz, one in LA and one in New York City. And you can see my reflection oh so many times standing behind the Codex at Sotheby's in New York. And I'm sure you know that the Codex sold for quite a pretty penny at one of the most boring auctions I have ever, the most boring auction I have ever attended in my life. And I've been to many auctions, and will be housed at the Museum of Jewish People in Israel. And Sophia will tell you that that is an exciting thing that will be for the people, the Jewish people and the people of Israel. But today we're speaking of the exhibit on the Sassoons that is currently on view at New York's Jewish Museum on the Upper East Side. The museum is on 5th Avenue and 92nd Street. It is housed in what used to be the Felix Warburg Mansion, which was built in 1907. And the short version of the story is that the Warburgs tried to sell the land for development, but that fell through. And so they ultimately donated the building to the Jewish Theological Seminary in 1942, and in 1944 rather, and JTS opened it in 1947 as the Jewish Museum. And here's a little known secret about New York. The museum offers free admission on Shabbat and holidays. The shop is closed, but the exhibits are open and you can go in for free because there is no money changing hands. It's great. So today we're here to look at the current special exhibit on the Sassoons, and it's up in New York through August 13th. The patriarch of the family, David Sassoon, 1792 to 1864, is here sitting in the chair surrounded by his sons. He is wearing traditional Iraqi garb, and we will see this again in a few slides where he is in this magnificent robe and a turban. He was a leading trader of cotton and opium, and he served as the treasurer of Baghdad between 1817 and 1829. This starts his story and then blossoms into the story of his sons, Sassoon, David Sassoon, on the far right, who was born in India, but became known as a British Indian businessman, a banker and philanthropist. Elias David Sassoon on the far left, and he was the first of the children to expand the family business into China when he opened a branch of the business in China in 1844. And Albert or Abdullah Sassoon, later Sir Albert Abdullah David Sassoon, 1st Baronet of Kensington. The names are going to become impossible. Wait till this slide. This is the extended Sassoon family in Bombay in 1863. and it becomes even more from this. Many of the photographs that I'm going to show you are not in the exhibit because I'm talking about the exhibit, but also about the family and sort of the background that makes the exhibit. So we have here, seated from left to right, Rachel, wife of Shalom Chaim David ben Moses, Sarah, wife of Isaac Nissim Moselle, daughter of Albert David Sassoon, Am, daughter of David Sassoon, Joseph, son of Meir Sassoon Nissim, he's the little one on his mother's lap, Edward, son of Albert David Sassoon, Aziza, wife of Ezekiel Gubai, we'll see them later, Flora, wife of Sassoon David Sassoon, and then another Flora, daughter of Ezekiel Gubai, and then standing from left to right is Aaron David Sassoon, Sassoon David Sassoon, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Joseph Hai Sassoon, son of Albert David Sassoon. Okay, I know it's difficult, it's impossible to sort out, and we'll meet many of them as we move along because the names are all the same. There are Wikipedia pages on many of them, and you can always check that out because it is a huge interconnected family. And on some levels, actually on many levels, this is a family that derived its wealth from the suffering of others. And that aspect of their life and livelihood is given lip service in the exhibit, but it's not really discussed. The Sassoons made their money in cotton, bolstered by the American Civil War, and more specifically by the opium trade. That is, smuggling of opium from India into China. You might even consider them the Sacklers of their day. Opium wealth is not limited to the Sassoons. This is the Forbes estate in Milton, Massachusetts. It's a nice shirt with the CSB hat. Isn't that wonderful? Obviously, that's not the way it's displayed, but I did get permission to put the CSP hat on the mannequin. And I recently learned that much of the wealth from the so-called Boston Brahmins comes from the opium trade. But the Bostonians or the Americans who were doing the opium smuggling were getting their poppies from Turkey. The Sassoons were getting their poppies in India. It's a fascinating topic, but we really can't explore that today. This, of course, is the patriarch of the Sassoon family, David Sassoon, and you saw him in the photograph before with his sons, and he's wearing traditional Jewish Baghdadi garb, even though he's in India. He's the patriarch, as I said, of the Sassoon dynasty, and he was one of 7 children born in Baghdad to his father, Sassoon ben Salah, who was a wealthy businessman, and he served as chief treasurer to the local Ottoman pashas and the Nasi, or the president of the Babylonian Jewish community. And this will help with some of the confusion with the names. There was a practice among some of the Jewish families for the sons to add their father's given names to their own name. So David came to be known as David Sassoon because his father was Sassoon ben Salah. So his son David became David Sassoon, right? Sassoon, in effect, became his surname as surnames became more popular. David Sassoon received a traditional Jewish education. He married a woman named Hannah, later called Aziza, Joseph of Basra, and she bore 4 children in Baghdad. She died there when she was still young. She was only 34. He then wed Flora, sometimes known as Farah, Flora Chaim, the mother of 10 further children, both sons and daughters, in Bombay. There is question as to why he emigrated from Baghdad to Mumbai, or Bombay as it was called then. There are hints of a scandal, and there were reports of persecution of the Jews. To be clear, this is not my area of expertise at all, so I have no opinions whatsoever on the matter and nothing to add. Just that once he got to India, David founded a company, David Sassoon and Sons, later called David Sassoon and Company, that quickly came to dominate the opium and cotton trades in the Persian Gulf, in India, Southeast Asia, China, and Japan. And with time, he expanded into numerous other commodities and to other fields as well. The family wound up with large holdings in banking and in real estate. And just like the Rothschilds, because they were, after all, the Rothschilds of the East, David dispatched his sons to important financial centers and trade posts in order to found new branches of the family business. This is on the left, is the first item that greets you as you enter the first gallery. The picture on the left is a wedding robe, and on the right is a picture, again, not in the exhibit, of the groom who owned this robe wearing it on his wedding day. As we saw in the portrait of David from many decades after their arrival in India, the Baghdadi Jews maintained the style of dress fashionable in their native Iraq. This magnificent robe was created for Ezekiel ben Joshua Gubai upon his marriage to Aziza Sassoon. That marriage was on Monday, the 8th of Shvat, 5613, which translates to January 17th, 1853. Ezekiel was born in Baghdad, and he immigrated to Bombay in 1842, and he worked in the Sassoon family firm. In 1843, he became one of the first Baghdadi Jews to trade in Shanghai. He later developed a reputation as a deeply philanthropic man. There was a note that accompanied the robe that states that Ezekiel would always lend this robe to grooms who could not afford to have a wedding robe of their own. Aziza was the eldest daughter of Sir Albert Abdullah Sassoon and the granddaughter of the patriarch, and she and Ezekiel had several prominent children, including the legendary Flora, whom we shall meet in a few minutes. Oops. Okay. No. All right. On the left is their ketubah. It's ink on paper in the style that was customary in Mumbai. On the right is another Sassoon ketubah that I put there for comparison. It's not in the exhibit, but the style is very much the same. And you can, just look at it. It's almost, if they were black and white pictures, it would be all but impossible to see how different that they are. But they really are not the same ketubah, but the style is very much the same. This was the marriage of Reuben David Sassoon and Catherine, later Kate Ezekiel. Reuben Chai ben David Sassoon Salah and Khatun rather is her name, Bat David Chai Ezekiel Abraham Matzia on Monday, the 6th of Adar, which was February 14th. Again, two of the greatest Baghdadi merchant families in India became united through marriage. I love this first room of the exhibition, right? There are a lot of interesting Jewish things in this room. And much of the rest of the exhibit is bereft of Jewish objects, except for books and other ritual objects, which later generations collected, and we will get to see later. But in this room and in this image, you can see the standard Sephardic Torah teaks in the back of the slide, right over here in the back of the slide on the left. So we're going to talk about the teaks, and then we're going to come back to talk about this slide in general, because I just want you to sort of have to guess and figure out what all of this is. It's going to be a question in your mind as we go forward. Two images of the same things, one from the front, obviously, and one from the back. These are great and somewhat unusual. They are a Torah and a Haftorah. Right? We rarely in the Ashkenazic world see a Haftorah scroll, especially displayed as if it were a Torah. They were commissioned by Flora Sassoon, and the gilt silver cases were crafted in China, but the scrolls were made and copied in Baghdad. They were all eventually brought to England. The inscription on the Torah case reads, quote, "This is the Torah that Moses sent before the Israelites," Torah, right? I share something, right? That Moses sent before the Israelites. "These are the rules, the laws, and instructions that the Lord established through Moses on Mount Sinai between himself and the Israelite people. This teak and the Torah scroll within it belong to the precious Signora Farah, wife of Silman David Sassoon, more blessed than the woman of the tent in the year, and I shall bless her." Now, we don't do years, and I shall bless her. That's not a date as far as we're concerned. But we call that a chronogram, and that's a chronogram for 643. You add the 5,000 in front of it, so you get the year 5,643, which is the equivalent of the year 882. So the chronogram, right, "and I shall bless her," is the year 1882. The second case, the second teak, has the inscription, "This is the teak and the Haftorah for the entire year, each Shabbat, new moon, and festival. Within it belong to the precious Signora Farah, wife of Silman David Sassoon, more blessed than the women of the tent in the year, and I shall bless her." Okay, so it's the same sort of thing, and both of these are hers. Another interesting thing here is that the inscription is just there, and you can just see it here. The inscription is just there, and that is not the norm on Indian and Iraqi Torahs. On Indian and Iraqi Torahs, the inscriptions at the top of the teak are usually behind glass, and sometimes they're just painted there. Right? So this is, I don't know that it's sui generis, but this is a very, very unusual style, likely because they were made in China. So this is a good opportunity to talk for a minute about Flora. Here on the left in 1897, right. On the right, we have her with her 3 children. Her children were born in Bombay between 1877 and 1884. Her son, David Solomon Sassoon, became known as the famous collector and founder of the Sassoon Library. And it was he who was the one who acquired the so-called Sassoon Codex. Okay, so now on the right, we have from left to right, Selina, Solomon David, Flora, the mother of David Solomon, Flora, the daughter of David Solomon and Selina, and David Solomon Sassoon. They all have the same name, right? You know, it's amazing. What makes her legendary is not only her scholarship, because she was educated and interested, but she managed the Mumbai office of David Sassoon and Company from the time of her husband's death in 1894, right, until 1901. She was the only woman in the family to oversee a branch of the firm. Okay. This is one more picture of her. This is the one, this is from the book that accompanies the exhibition. And I think it was also in a recent Hadassah magazine article about her and about the family in general. This is Flora in 1900, and she could really be any rich, elegant English woman. And you wouldn't know that she was a Baghdadi Jew living in Bombay. She looks like she's ready to go meet the queen. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So now back to this artifact and back to this slide. You forgot about it, I'm sure. The artifact on the left, yes, it's a hand, it's a hamsa, and it is inscribed. It's a standard, a sort of banner, if you will, and Iraqi Jews would carry it, or better, bring it with them when they went on pilgrimages, and when they went on pilgrimages to the tomb of the prophet Ezekiel. You can see the pictures of that on the right. The one on top is quite recent. That's actually from 2019, so that's as recent as we can get. The one on the far right over here is from the early 1930s, I think it's 1932, with a group of Iraqi Jews praying, right? And they're praying at the tomb of Ezekiel, the prophet. And this one, the bottom middle, is the current state of the interior of the Jewish section of the shrine, because the shrine now is a holy place for both Muslims and Jews, and it's in a larger mosque complex. Jews used to go to the tomb on Shavuot, and they would also visit on behalf of a sick family member. And when they would go because someone was sick, they would carry a standard such as this, an amulet, right, with the person's name on it and different brachot and blessings for their healing. The Sassoons were very, very philanthropic, and they supported the upkeep of the shrine. And this particular standard was in the collection of David Solomon Sassoon before it was purchased by the Jewish Museum at auction in the year 2000. The pilgrimage site is in modern Al-Kifil, and I know Iraqi Jews from Baghdad who took school trips there when they were kids. And it's just under a 2-hour drive, because I once asked a friend of mine, did he know about it? And he started telling me about the field trip he took in like 5th or 6th grade. And I thought that was just so amazing. This picture is in the exhibition. Most of the photographs aren't, but this one is. In 1851, David Sassoon bought a mansion in an affluent new area of Mumbai. The house was surrounded by gardens and fountains. They named it after Frederick the Great's palace in Potsdam, Germany. It was called Sanssouci. David and later his son Albert Abdullah hosted lavish parties there and entertained many important dignitaries. And yes, that is me, well, my hands and my phone taking pictures for this talk, just to prove I was there. Sanssouci is now Messina Hospital in Mumbai. Clearly a humble family home. That's the house. Okay, again, this is not in the exhibit, but it serves to explain much of what is in the exhibit. We move from their Jewish life to what I would call their assimilated lives, still Jews, no doubt, but they achieved acceptance into the rarefied world of the super rich. They were, after all, the Rothschilds of the East. This one, you cannot read what it says there, but what it says is, visit of the Prince of Wales to Sanssouci, the Sassoon family house in Bombay, 5 February 1876. They entertained the Prince of Wales in their home, right? Which is now, of course, a hospital. I love this perspective where we get to see the next 3 rooms. But as we move through to the second gallery, we now enter a small room. And now the underlying focus of the exhibit, at least what I see as the underlying focus of the exhibit, comes clearer. This next room has, among other things, 3 vitrines with these 11 objects. One might even say trinkets, each of which is stunning. Just what I would love to have on my dresser or out on display in one of the many bookcases in my living room. Look at that Cartier desk clock in the middle, right? But I really like that the best, right? These were never part of any Sassoon collection. They did not belong to the family members at all. But look at who owns each and every one of them. This is owned by the Royal Collection Trust. And you can't really see this here clearly, but it gives you the locations of all of the objects in the Royal Collection Trust. The locations are Buckingham Palace, Windsor Palace, Balmoral Palace, right? These are all listed as on loan to the Jewish Museum, right? From their website. This group of 11 gifts from the Sassoon family to the royal family have been included in this wide-ranging exhibition at the Jewish Museum, New York. This exhibition studies the art, patronage, and networks of the Sassoon family, several of whom were connected with members of the royal family in the early 20th century, including King Edward VIII, Queen Mary, and King Edward VII, rather, Queen Mary and King Edward VIII. Sir Philip Sassoon entertained Queen Mary with tours of his residence and collections at Port Lyme, and his cousins Moselle Sassoon and Hannah Gubai presented the Queen with several gifts. Each and every label in these 3 vitrines say, lent by His Majesty King Charles III. Now, I don't know how many exhibits you have been at that have Jewish artifacts. I've been to many all over the world. You do not see labels that say lent by His Majesty. Well, of course, until recently, there wasn't His Majesty King Charles III, but you've never seen a label that said lent by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, right? This is unbelievable because these people were connected, right? Big time. And that's what's going on here. This is Sassoon, David Sassoon, God, shown shortly before his marriage to Flora Farah Rubin on the 17th of February, 1850. The date is given on this picture in both the Georgian calendar dates and Islamic dates. And the inscription is in Persian. And it's inspired by Sufi poetry, right? I don't want to waste the time reading it to you, but if you're interested, I will. I can read it later. But this was likely a wedding present from someone whose name is only partially recorded in the picture. It shows that in 1850, the Sassoons are still connected to their origin. They're still within the Eastern tradition of the Jewish people. But as we saw with the gifts to royalty, the focus now changes. The Sassoons are no longer the Eastern Jews who hold tight to their Iraqi roots. They are now the Sassoons integrated and integrating into British society, high society. And the children and grandchildren, of course, the great-grandchildren of David Sassoon focused their collecting on the type of collections that would accord them a secure place in the highest social circles. And they did belong to the highest social echelons of society. This is a Gainsborough, and it depicts Gainsborough himself and his wife and their daughter, identified likely as their first child, Mary, who died shortly before her 2nd birthday. Philip Sassoon, whom we will discuss in about 2 slides, featured this painting in 2 of the prominent exhibitions he mounted at his London home. It's now property of the National Gallery in London, having been acquired under the Acceptance in Lieu Act. I find this fascinating, which is a way that the really, really rich in England are allowed to pay death duties and taxes by transferring important cultural or scientific or historic objects and archives to the nations, right? So this was in the Sassoon collection. It's a Gainsborough, right? And it was accepted, right, as a gift instead of taxes. It was given by Philip Sassoon's sister, Sybil. Okay, this is Sybil Rachel Betty Nee Sassoon, the Countess of Roxavage, later the Marchioness of Shumley, right? Philip's sister, right? There in a picture, there herself with the picture behind her. Come on. The portrait here is a sergeant portrait, right? And most of the portraits that we're going to see are sergeants. And it is inscribed to Sybil from her friend, John S. Sargent. It was given to her by the artist as a wedding gift upon her marriage to George Shumley, the Urge of Rock Savage, right? And I just think this is also really cool. The shawl that she's wearing, remember, she's a Sassoon, right? The shawl that she's wearing was also a gift from Sargent. Okay, now on to Philip. Okay, this one is a John Singer Sargent. This is a photograph. But this portrait of Philip Sassoon, right, was bequeathed to the Tate Gallery by Philip, whose full name is Sir Philip Albert Gustave David Sassoon. And it was done by the artist long after he had stopped doing portraits because Sargent and Sassoon were close friends. Sir Philip was a member of Parliament. He was a connoisseur and a wealthy patron of the arts. He served as a trustee of the National Gallery. He was its chairman from 32 to 36. He was a trustee of the Tate, of the Wallace Collection, and the British School at Rome. And you can see from the photograph, again, it's not in the exhibition. It's from a polo match, right, in August of 1936. Sir Philip Sassoon had prominent friends. He's shown here with the Prince of Wales, later Edward VIII, and of course, Winston Churchill, who at that point in time had already given up playing polo. We'll get back to his friendship with Churchill in a minute. But first, his mother, here shown in another sergeant. Again, all of these sergeants are in the collection. And this is, as I said, Philip's mother, Aileen Caroline de Rothschild, later Lady Sassoon. She was the daughter of Baron Gustav de Rothschild, and at age 19, she married Edward Sassoon, later Sir Edward Sassoon, the second baronet, and he's one of the ones that were born in Bombay, not in Baghdad, right? Because he was the son of Abdullah Sassoon, so he's the grandson of the patriarch. This marriage, of course, strengthened the ties between these two great families. This painting, right, was on display at the Royal Academy soon after it was finished in 1907. The critics loved it, but the poet Wilfrid Blunt wrote, quote, "Sargent paints nothing but Jews and Jewesses, and he says he prefers them as they have more life and movement than our English women." Just thought was a rather interesting quote. The exhibit has other artists besides Sargent. There are also some Churchills. This one shows Philip's home in Kent, Port Lim, spelled Lympne, mind you, but it's pronounced Lim, Lord knows. Churchill was a frequent visitor there. Sir Philip bought 270 acres near Kent when he became the Member of Parliament for Kent, and he had a house built there. It is now a 600-acre hotel and wild animal park. But this is the house. Come on, you can't make this stuff up. It's amazing. This is another Churchill in the exhibit showing Sir Philip's drawing room at Port Lim. And the woman sitting right here on the chair is Lady Pamela Smith, later Lady Hartwell, another socialite of the time, but not related to the family at all. And the photo that I have of her there is not in the exhibition, but heck, she's in our picture, so we might as well see what she looks like for real. These are visitor books from Port Lim. They are in the exhibition. On the left, you can see two self-portraits of Charlie Chaplin. right? How do you like that for your guest book? Let's have Charlie Chaplin draw pictures of himself, right? In the guest book, you have, besides Chaplin, other notables that Sassoon entertained, right? T.E. Lawrence, Edward, Prince of Wales, Mrs. Simpson, the Duke of York, Lord Louis Mountbatten, Lord Curzon, Lord Rocksavage, who, if you remember, was married to Sybil Sassoon, who was his sister, right? You have a Romanian aristocrat, Princess Martha, whose last name I cannot pronounce, and George Bernard Shaw. The list goes on and on and on. There are 2 guest books in the exhibition, lots of important people. Philip's collection was mostly figurative art rather than the popular avant-garde art of the time. This is another sergeant inscribed to Philip. It is of a girl from Capri. We could spend a lot of time with the sergeants and the stories of the sitters, but I want to now go to more of the Judaica, specifically the books and a couple of the other Judaic artifacts. And then we'll pop into the last gallery for a minute or 2 to see another sergeant painting that particularly caught my fancy. Sassoon, David Sassoon's 4th son, Reuben. Got that? Sassoon, David Sassoon's 4th son, Reuben, 1835 to 1905, is thought to be the first member of the family to collect Jewish ceremonial art. Neither of these pictures are in the exhibit. On the left, he is dressed as a Persian prince for a fancy dress ball at Devonshire House in 1897. And on the right, he is shown in a Vanity Fair, I don't want to say caricature, but I will, from 1890. He grew up in India. When he came of age, he was sent by his father to conduct family business, first in Hong Kong, then in Shanghai. But in 1860, he was called back to Bombay. Following his father's passing, his older brother, Sassoon, required assistance in London, and so Reuben and his family and his widowed mother moved there in 1867, which was the year of his father's death. Reuben's transition into British society was smooth. He was a
Sharon, you're cut off. Can you just, who can signal? If, 1 second, Sharon, your last sentence was, 2 sentences were cut off. You were frozen. So go back.
Should I restart the slide again?
Yeah, he moved to London with his family.
Okay. And well, okay, so he moved because some people, I think they're giving me the hands up. They heard me, but whatever. He was a talented bridge player. He liked horseback riding. He enjoyed the theater, and he was a very generous patron of the art. He was a member of the so-called Marlborough House set, which was also known as the Smart Set, which was a social clique that revolved around Prince Edward, the son of Queen Victoria, who was the heir apparent to the throne. When Edward took the throne in his first coronation honors, Arthur and Reuben were both appointed members of the Royal Victorian Order. Even with all of this, and this is what impresses me the most, Reuben remained faithful to Jewish tradition, and the Sassoons firm in London, the Sassoon firm's London offices had a mezuzah on the door, and the offices were closed on Shabbat and holidays. His house in Hove was not far from the house of another man named Philip Solomons, who was a very, very well-known Judaica collector. After Solomon's death in 1867, Reuben purchased a large portion of this already famous Judaic collection. Many of the pieces from Solomon's rooftop synagogue were transferred to Reuben's private synagogue in his home on the north side of Hyde Park. Right. By buying this, right, he established the majority of the Sassoon Judaica collection as being Ashkenazi. There were Italian ceremonial pieces there as well, but the Sassoons, who were from the East, most of their collection is Ashkenazi because it was founded by someone else and it was bought in bulk. After Reuben's death, the Judaica collection passed to his sister-in-law, Flora, and her son, David. Remember them? They're the ones who have been collecting Hebrew manuscripts, totaling at this point now over 1,200 volumes. This is David Solomon Sassoon on a visit to China in 1900. Now we get to some Judaica objects. These are spectacular Torah finials. They're Dutch. They were made in the Netherlands, obviously between 1840 and 1857. The staves are engraved with the inscription, Philip Solomons Esquire. They were displayed in London in 1906 in an art gallery in Whitechapel. And there's a catalog note there that says, the chasing on the staves is very much in English style, suggesting that this and possibly the applied stones were added when the finials came into possession of Philip Solomons of England. Right? So the stones that we have here and the chasing here were probably added on by this initial collector rather than, right, by the Sassoons. These are another pair of Torah finials. They have pineapple, look at that, pineapple motifs. They're much smaller. They're only about 6 inches tall. The shafts are chased with acanthus leaf tips. They are engraved with a crest and a Hebrew motto. The inscription on one knob is engraved Philip Solomons Esquire, and the inscription in Hebrew says, a donation from that which God has bestowed upon me, Judah Aryeh, known as Labe, son of the departed Yitzhak Isaac of blessed memory, in the year 5595, which translates to 1835. And above the lion, and you can barely see this here, it says, Judah is a lion's whelp. And that, of course, comes from the blessings of the sons in Genesis chapter 49. This yad, this Torah pointer, is Dutch, and it has a triple inscription in Hebrew that reads, for the honor of God and his Torah. Again, it's thought that the stones, both precious and semi-precious, are later additions to it. Clearly, we can't look at everything, but I like this Megillat Esther very much. This one is Eastern. I think that's why I like it, not Ashkenazi. It's mid-19th century from Baghdad. And as you can see, it's really quite small. Right? David Sassoon published a catalog of his collection in 1932. In it, he wrote about how he began to collect when he was still quite young. Quote, the first item of my collection was not a manuscript, but a rare printed booklet, namely the Scroll of Esther in Arabic, as printed for use of the Baghdadi Jews in India, dated Bombay, 1859. I was 8 years old when I got it by exchanging a kite with a boy. Come on, that's really cool. He exchanged a kite for a Megillat Esther. The first manuscript to enter his collection was an illuminated Megillat Esther that originally belonged to one of his uncles. This one belonged to a different uncle. This one belonged to his uncle Reuben, and it is inscribed R.D. Sassoon, meaning Reuben David Sassoon. When we did our pre-Pesach program, I did promise we would look at this piece. It's a beautiful Haggadah from 1868. It was commissioned for the youth Ezekiel Judah by his father, Sassoon Ezekiel Judah of Kolkata. The Judahs were a Baghdadi family that rose to prominence in India through international trade. This is a rare example of a Hebrew illumination. An illumination means it's got gold on it, from India. The text itself follows the Baghdadi rite. It has the Hebrew text on one side, and the other side has a translation into Judeo-Arabic, likely to help the people understand what's going on. Just as we have Hebrew and English, they have Hebrew and Judeo-Arabic. Excuse me, Judeo-Arabic is a form of Arabic. It's a pidgin, very much like Yiddish is a pidgin, right? And it uses Hebrew script, again, just like Yiddish uses Hebrew script, to speak both the language of the locals and the language of the people. This is Rambam. This is Maimonides. It's the guide to the perplexed. It's really early and it's really cool. It's from Catalonia. The scribe is named Levi ben Isaac ben Caro of Salamanca. Here is a close-up of the coat of arms and of the lion rampant, and another page of the manuscript. There is a purchase note in David Sassoon's catalog of 1932. Bechor Levi of Constantinople, court physician of Sultan Abdul el Hamid, died circa 1899. Now we're going to go into the last room, and I'm going to finish on time with time for questions. I'm so excited. We're going to go into the last room and look at two paintings on the far right, only one of which you can make out just behind the man over there. I'm going to show you the last two paintings separately. This is the first one. This is the second one. And then I'm going to put them next to each other as they are displayed on the far back wall, and we'll discuss them. They are so very much the same. Thank goodness the frames are different. Right? Because otherwise they're the same picture. They depict the ruined cathedral at Air after a fierce battle during World War I. This is a photograph of what it actually looked like, right? Close to the river Somme, Air was caught up in some of the heaviest fighting on the Western Front during the First World War. The town was under constant bombardment throughout the conflict, and 12,000 Allied troops were stationed there. They lived deep underground in a network of caves and tunnels, many of which were lighted by electricity. The Air Cathedral was destroyed by shelling in April of 1917 during the run-up to the Nivelle offensive. Once the war was over, the cathedral, the town hall, and all the old houses that formed the Kabul Market Square were rebuilt following the original plans of design as closely as possible, and they were finally restored to their former glory in the 1920s. But what makes these pictures, formerly both in the Philip Sassoon collection, so wonderful is that the one on the right is a sergeant. He painted it when he came upon the scene in the summer of 1918. The one on the left is a copy of the sergeant made by Churchill, because he had seen it so frequently in Sassoon's drawing room, and he had Philip lend it to him so that he could copy it. I just think that's amazing. And that sums up the Sassoons. So as I end, I want to encourage you to go to the exhibit. I know that there is a lot of discussion about its curatorship, both positive and a lot negative, but it is a worthwhile exhibition. If you're not in the area, the Jewish Museum's website has a virtual lecture that you can watch on the Sassoons. That's what I have a picture of here. And there are SoundCloud recordings discussing some of the major pieces in the exhibit. So you can actually feel like you were there without being there. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Are you looking through the chat? Do you want me to?
I do not have the chat. So
Okay.
if you'd like to, please don't read questions. If you'd like to have a conversation with me about some of the questions, that would be fantastic.
I actually have a question. You meant in the beginning, those two, the Sefer Torah and the Haftarah, that were owned by Flora. I didn't keep track. Flora, one of the women. Wasn't it very unique for a woman to own a Sefer Torah?
Okay, well, she didn't. This was probably used by the family. She commissioned it.
Okay, but she put her name on it.
It was no. She had it made for her. It was made for her. Right. It was a dedication. Just as you dedicate, that there used to be signs, that people would bring. Sea of Galilee, dedicated in memory of. Right. It's a way of giving money and honoring the community and the Torah, and it's the mitzvah of making it beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have here remarks. I don't know. Somebody was asking about David Sassoon when he was about to take over his father's position. The Muslim leadership felt threatened by his power and influence, and then he fled to Iran and India.
That's one of the Bohemites that go along with it. There was a scandal. There was a scandal.
No doubt.
Right? And we look, let's be clear. These people were the Sacklers of their time. Mm-hmm. Right? These people think about the Opium Wars. Thank you for everybody who's saying it was nice. They were the Sacklers. Opium was a big deal. Opium was a very, very big deal.
Very big, yeah.
And the British and the British, the colonialists, they were colonialists, right? The British, they were British in that regard, and the American were, but more so the British were they were making addicts, just as the Sacklers were making addicts. Opium was a big friggin' deal. And opium was a very, very lucrative trade. And there was a lot of smuggling because it was illegal. And it all came through this way. There was the turkey, right? The turkey poppies came from the Americans. The Indian poppies came from the British.
Very interesting. I also find it very interesting that many of them still kept their Judaism practices. Is that throughout the family or only to a few branches?
Some of them that, there was a lot, the earlier generations, very much so, not so much the later generations. They were more labeled than they were practiced. Just like the Rothschilds or any of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Few people asking about the Sufi poem that was behind.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I'll get that. Let me just pull that up.
I wanted you to read it out.
Yeah. I will. I'll be happy to. Because that I don't know by heart. That one I have to actually read. Why can I not see it? Hold on one second. Okay. So it starts with, at the behest of D. Filmar K, that's just the name, the soul-nourishing image of Khawaja Sassoon unveiled so the stranger may see your face for himself. You are big and appear small in the mirror. Thus, this image has been made as it may become our memorial. As the body shall not live forever, a kind-hearted person one day out of mercy may offer a prayer for the indigent.
Mhm.
And, that's some kind of wedding present, you're gonna die. We will remember you through this.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Any more? There's more general questions about English Jewry, which I don't think that's really your part in life, and also about Yiddish, again, not really your part of life. Thank you, amazing. A bit more about the opium and the Chinese Boer War.
The opium stuff is fascinating, and the American wealth that came through that is also kind of amazing. That's why I put that, I thought that was kind of cute, the Forbes nightshirt with the CSP hat. I sort of like that.
Okay, we can draw. I can say
there's a question. This one, let me answer this. There's a question about why is there a controversy over the curatorship of the exhibit? Because a lot of the exhibits, Philip Sassoon was a very famous gay man. And there've been a number of books written on it, and that is totally and completely ignored in the exhibition. And that is really problematic, right? Because it was a major part of his identity, and it is just wiping it out. And that's huge. It's as if you put up an exhibition about Jews and you don't mention that they were Jewish. Right? It is overwhelmingly a hole in the exhibit. So there's that. There's also the fact that there really isn't a discussion of them as Jews versus assimilation. And that is missing from the exhibit. So there are a lot of holes in the curatorial aspect of the exhibit. And to a person, the press has been very positive about it, and to a person, the art world has not been as positive about it, which is very, very interesting. The objets are fantastic. Its presentation raises questions among many. So Leslie, that was your question. I hope that you are okay with that answer.
Thank you very much.
Somebody named Holly Ann Katz said that they'll be there on Thursday. I don't know what that means. So if it's something that I need to know about, please let me know. If it's something that's for you, Sophia, now you know.
Well, there's programs on Thursday. I hope they're coming to that program, to our program. Yes. We will be sending out the recording and a few of the links. Oh, we do not send out the recording.
We do not send out this recording at all.
No, I'm sorry, you're right. We cannot send out recordings of Sharon, but I can probably send out recordings of previous.
Right, you can send out the links to the one on the Last Kings of Shanghai.
Yeah.
And of the Sharon Mintz program. Those are both very, very good programs.
Yes. And I can send out a few of the links.
And put in the link for the YouTube from the Jewish Museum lecture, which is also very good. Of course,
I will.
And if people have questions for me, I'm easy to reach.
Okay. So I'm sorry if I could not, pay attention to all the questions here. People are really very thankful, grateful for your talk. While later on, David. Okay, I think that's it. I will forward you if there was anything very important. Thank you so much.
Oh, someone asked how do you reach me? I teach at Hofstra. You can find me. Thank you, Margot. You can find me at Hofstra University. So it's sharon.r.keller@hofstra.edu. Now, Lydia, I see you. So hello, Lydia, even though you're looking at your, but I see Lydia. So now I can wave to Lydia.
Okay, hi, Lydia. I can send the email out if people want to.
People know how to. People can reach me.
People can reach out.
Oh, hello, Renee Fleischer. There is Sharon Keller. Please say hello to Ellie for me. Okay, there are two Sharon Keller.
Okay,
Go ahead, Shobana.
goodbye. See you later on.
Goodbye, thank you. Goodbye, Mimi. Goodbye, Lindy. Goodbye, Sharon Steinberg. Goodbye, Mike. We have to Zoom soon. Goodbye, Joel. We have to Zoom soon. Goodbye, Crafts. Goodbye, Kenters. Goodbye, everybody.